Hi, Steve Stolberg here with monthly painting video number 64, made in Kuala Lumpur, April 2019. This month it's kind of cowboys and Indians fantasy pin-up. Uh, you know, not more like the Hollywood cowboy and Indians fantasy. You know, not the real world Wild West, but the Wild West of imagination. Some might say cultural appropriation about that, about things like that. What I'm doing here, what Hollywood did to Indians. I had complaints in the past. Well, this one guy that complained when I painted a Native American-looking kind of centaur lady. Anyway, that was a long time ago. But anyway, let me know if you're offended somehow by this. Okay, there's lots of scenery in this image, as you'll see. You can already see here. Of course, I used the famous Monument Valley, as you can see, on the border of Arizona and Utah as reference. I've never been there, though I did drive through some other parts of Arizona once. This is the sketching stage already begun, of course, on a kind of earth tone colored background, because we're going to have a lot of earth tones in this one. Here I'm selecting areas. It's my usual workflow. Sketch, then select, then fill in a single color in this selection. Yeah, we have a kind of a cowboy guy there down at the lower right hand corner as well. So they're gonna kind of be in a plane here in the foreground. Obviously they're not flat, but I'm flatting in colors in a quite flat way. I always do it this way, you know. Simplifying, I guess you can say, and making it easier to put them on their own layers, like you can see here on the right hand side here, girl, rock, cliffs, with the sketch on top. So more selecting and more flatting in. For the cliffs they have two tones, plus some other slight tints. As you'll see in a moment. See here I'm slightly shading one of the lit side. Now normally backgrounds, landscapes like this, they don't have a lot of contrast like this one has. But this is strong sunlight coming from one side with a lot of shadow on the other side. So you'll see two tones like this. Distance tends to flatten colors and tones, just like you can see here. It's quite flat. Of course, in the foreground here, don't get confused now. I'm going to unflatten this area here by shading a lot later. But that's for now. I think it's very practical to have her on her own layer, one single layer for her, and the rock on one single layer, because that makes it easy, really easy to paint the shadow under, you know, where she touches the rock. It's really easy to paint on the rock there, because all I do is go to the layer and paint. And if you do this logically enough, you almost don't have to do a lot of selecting later. So I've handled all the selecting already. Yeah, I've talked a lot about this before in other videos, how I split it up like this, and how I don't like to use a lot of layers, adjustment layers and stuff like that, but just kind of using the KISS principle, KISS, keep it simple stupid, which is just, it's an engineering principle. I think it was developed by the Marines or by NASA or something like that. Anyway, here I'm shading the body, as you can see. She's sitting in shadow and the cowboy is sitting in the light. Now there are two things wrong with this cowboy. The second thing hasn't come in yet, but you can see the first one already. The light is coming from the wrong direction. If that's sunlight hitting him, the same sunlight as in the background, is coming from the opposite direction. So that's something that's wrong, which I fixed right at the end. And the second thing was the cigarette smoke from his cigarette is going in the opposite direction to her hair. Her hair is blowing one way and his smoke is blowing the other way. So That's another thing that I fixed later as well. You haven't seen the smoke yet, but you will soon. Here I am detailing and shading, fiddling around with her skin here mostly. Starting some detailing. Decorations on her dress, on her front and on the chest of her dress. The fringe and some beadwork on the front there. Later you'll see me filling in the top with more cloth and also at the same time pushing down the beadwork, which makes it look smaller and all that makes it look more intricate. So yeah, I wanted it to be taking up less space, to be less eye-catching and big. So smaller, more intricate beadwork. And here I'm working on the face. Sketching in first sketching in more detail. It's still very sketchy, the face, and these beads here are also, they're very sketchy, as you can see right there. But I am detailing the hair a little bit back there. And actually right here is, the hair is already fairly finished. I actually didn't do much more to the hair than this. I changed the shape a little bit of the hair. I pushed the top down a little bit later. I pulled one of these tresses out a bit, But generally speaking, yeah, I don't like to draw every single hair strand, and make it look super polished. It's just, I don't know, to me it feels like a waste of time. Well, there are other things that need to be very accurately represented, but hair isn't one of them. Like the face, for instance. Face is very crucial. Details are very crucial in the face. Okay, so here I'm adding rock texture, but actually it's a bark texture, tree bark texture I made for another Patreon video a couple of years back. But it works as rock as well, like cracks in the rock. And of course later you'll see, if you compare this to the finished version, you'll see that I darkened the rock quite a lot later on. It's just a compositional thing that you only see these things once. Most of the rest of it is 80% finished. When you got all the tones in, when you worked across the entire image with a certain level of finish, so that you have all the basic tones and colors, and then you zoom out and then you look at it, and you can usually see after a while. In this case, I saw that the rocks needed to be darker because it's a compositional thing. They're in the foreground, and she's in the foreground, and she needed to blend in more with the rock. It needed to be like more. It gave more depth to the image. Basically, it's what happened. More separation from this area, the next layer behind the rock. Yeah, you can see the cigarette smoke here, like I mentioned. He still has this, the lighting is wrong and the cigarette smoke is wrong, but I'll fix that later. Moccasins. I did use some reference. It's easy to find reference for this, but of course I'm not at all sure I'm using the right reference, but I did search for Navajo leggings, which these were supposed to be. I'm not sure, but that's what the images said on Google. And of course this is Navajo country, from what I can understand, also by googling Monument Valley. But anyway, the rest of her, I mean, she doesn't even herself look like a Navajo, so it's just, it's not. I tried to be a little accurate with the details, just to give a flavor of realism to the whole thing, but it's probably way off when it comes to historical accuracy. More detailing on the face here. I like to sometimes try to leave a little bit of brush marks. I try to not smooth everything out completely. I do smooth stuff, but I try to not do it 100%. Try to leave 10%. And so you can see her cheek is very smooth, except there are a few brush strokes here and there. And that's cool because later you'll see when you use the unsharp mask at the end, you'll see those brush strokes pop back out again. Right now everything is blurry, and that's because you're working on the image, you're moving stuff, you're changing stuff, you're adding stuff, you're warping stuff, and you know, everything you do, all the image processing you're doing is blurring the pixels a little bit each time you do something. So there's no use in adding unsharp mask until right at the end. But it's a really fun time when you do, because it gives that little extra kick to the image when you do that. And here you can see I'm using Puppet Warp, which is perfect for a string of beads like this, which I just made there. And so you can sort of pull it around very easily, like it's, you know, it's blowing in the wind here. Is what I'm going for. Of course, it's heavier than the hair, much heavier than the hair, so it's not going to be almost horizontal like the hair, or even higher than horizontal, but it's just going to give a little bit of a swing to the right, and then some shading. You know, later I darkened the beads. They're still a bit too bright here, if you compare to the skin color. And I made a mistake there with some, the colored beads were in the wrong place, some of them were in the wrong place, so I moved them around a bit. Little things like that you gotta look out for. Detailing the leggings, the moccasins here, leggings and moccasins, and there's gonna be a hint of some beading here on the top of the moccasins, which you'll see, and on the side as well. Maybe I can jump forward a little bit. It's going a bit slow right now. There we go. Here's the beading. Just a selection and some vertical stripes and some checkerboard type patterns, and yeah, that's it. That's all you need. And some stuff on the top of the moccasins as well. And I'm working on this guy, but this is kind of wasted work what I'm doing right here, because I actually made a whole new cowboy with, like, I completely repainted the hat, because with the lighting coming from the opposite direction, you need this area to be. I kept both of them, so you can have a look in the PSD file. If you get the PSD file, you can hide the layer of Cowboy 1, and you can show Cowboy 2, so you can see the difference. But it's just, yeah, the shadow is highlight and the highlight is shadow. It's just reversed lighting. Detailing the fingers a little bit here. And this rifle is supposed to be the typical Winchester rifle that they had back then. Which again, you know, use reference when you know what time period it is, and you know what weapon your character is going to be holding. You know, it's you don't need to. Only with science fiction do you need to invent your own weapon. You know, it's not a good thing to steal somebody else's design for a science fiction weapon. But when it comes to historical stuff like this, it's easy to find it online. And the belt here, it's supposed to be turquoise and silver or tin or you know, some kind of metal. I didn't like it in the end. I worked on it quite some time, but then I didn't like it, so I put it on its own layer. It's still there in the file if you want to have a look at it on the PSD file. But what I did was I moved it just to its own layer so that I could hide it. I just preferred it without that. And the laces, it's just a matter of selecting the shape you want, and then yeah, a couple of them were too thin there, so I added some thickness to it, and yeah, then you give some volume by just adding a lighter color. I usually start out with the darkest color, and then I go up from there with lighter colors later. Or you can do it the other way too, it doesn't matter that much. It matters more with physical media. It's probably a habit I picked up from when I was using physical media, because it's easier, like with gouache or acrylic or oil, or actually with most physical media, it's easier to just lay down something dark first. Not watercolor, of course. Watercolor you gotta darken it progressively, but yeah, most of the media. Here I'm just detailing, creating more interesting decoration on the front here, beadwork, some folds and wrinkles. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, I mentioned earlier, but I forgot to tell you the moment it happened here. I extended her dress upwards and just made it more, I think I made it more appropriate to the you know, the historical time period. Like I think this is more like how they made clothing back then. It came up higher, and they just sort of tied it off at the shoulders. Like this. Later I colored that fringe in a warm color to make it look like leather, because I think it was usually leather. The fringe coming off the bottom of the chest area there. And you can see there I made the decoration on her chest a bit smaller, shrinking it downwards. And later I will also add color to that, which is easy when you have a dark gray color like this. You just put colorize on your brush, and then you just run. I'm using the main colors for her decorations is red and turquoise, and then there's a kind of a purplish color, and of course the gray base color that her dress is. Her headband is I've made it wider. You can see right now I'm working on a rock, so let's talk about the rock. It's a simple matter of very random selection first, and then a textured brush inside, and then invert the selection and work outside the selection area. But don't don't instantly get rid of it, but use it both ways. You first use it inside and then invert it and use the outside as well. But also definitely the more different selections you make, the more worked the area will look. So you can definitely do a secondary selection after you do the first one. But here basically I'm just doing one selection in each area to detail the rocks. There's that textured brush again. Basically it's the same textured brush here I'm using all along for this, during this phase of the work. There it is again. So these selections they're done very quickly. It's hard to see because everything goes fast by now. It's speeded up 999%. But I do the selections trying not to think too much about them. I try to let my hand sort of wiggle around on its own, like if you think too much about your selection and do it too slowly, chances are that it might get a little bit regular and a little bit artificial looking, stiff. And that's always a challenge when you're trying to do something natural, like a natural formation, like a rock formation, a tree, many trees together, a forest, clouds. In this case we have dust clouds here, which are also a challenge because they are very irregular and chaotic. And they sort of creep along the ground, which is what I'm doing right there. You see those little pointy bits that are sort of, that's how the dust cloud is flattened against the ground, and by perspective, because we're looking and right now I hidden the selection. The selection is still there, but I'm using it when it's hidden. It distracts me, so I always hide it. Control H. And so I work inside it and then invert it and work outside it, and then back again, back and forth. See, I'm darkening one part of the cloud here. It casts a shadow, but not a very heavy one, because it's semi-transparent. And yeah, the perspective is doing this. If you were looking straight down from space down onto this cloud, you wouldn't see these pointy bits at all, because you would just see a normal cloud. But due to perspective, it is there. Now I really don't like this white that I added there. That's not good for a cloud, and I actually removed some of it later. Well, it's done. After this, you can see here the hat has the reverse lighting on it, and I added this little thing, which is like a Civil War officer kind of hat would have these things. I don't know, just another story element that I was thinking about. Yeah, these two guys are working together. Maybe these guys are the enemy. I don't know. It's a posse coming to get them, or I'm not sure. If you can make up your own mind if they're creating an ambush or not. But yeah, it kind of feels like an ambush, because they're up here in safety, and with rifles they could easily get the drop on these guys here, especially if they come a little bit closer down along here. Yeah, I added a Colt Navy and holster on her hip later. You can see that in the actual file. I didn't actually have it here. It hasn't been added yet. But after I stopped this process and stopped recording, I did add it. But anyway, hope you like it. Let me know if you have any feedback or questions. Thanks for your support, and see you next month.